to be in fear. These are the personifications of the powers that structure the society. You, as you know yourself, are not the final term of your being.
The dark times of my past actually has prepared me to be the man that I am today. Now I get a second chance to live. Right? It's like having two lives in one life.
I wanted other people to be able to experience this. Everyone can heal. I truly went to hell, and somehow I kept going. So I know what it's like. And hopefully there's one person out there that I can help.
There's a different lens I'm looking through it now. And I'm not gonna let the hurt rule my life. I'm not gonna get stuck in my trauma.
The meaning behind your life, you know? Everyone has challenges. We're gonna go through that first part, post-traumatic. Okay, it's after trauma, blank. No, after trauma, I've grown. That's just the goal in human life to me.
Everybody has to walk a journey in life to motivate ourselves and others to change the world.
I mean, it's the people who color outside the lines that usually discover the new science. But that doesn't mean we should just scribble either. This is the holy grail of cognitive science.
To connect biology and behaviors and mental health and view a human being as a holistic existence.
We need stress, right? We need pain. We need all the things that we suffer from because it's important that we value it for what it is and realize where we have to change how we see ourselves.
Humans are capable of incredible things. You know, the trauma and the difficulties that we're facing, that we all face, are actually the launch pad of something incredible.
Trauma offers not just something to be defeated, but something to be made an ally of, something to learn from, something to pass through. The nature of the world is in some sense inherently traumatic. And so I think we're on the cusp of some very serious confrontations with ourselves and with our nature and with the way that we've moved in the world.
That's happening right now. Right now.
The dark night of the soul represents, to me, a reverence for the unknown and the challenges of life.
That right there, you can find something. You just got to know how to shine light on it and bring it back with you. Because the deeper you can travel that, I've always believed the more you can bring into the world that is good.
We can actually contribute to the prosperity of the world, to the benevolence of the world as a result of what we went through. The essence of post-traumatic growth is the possibility that you can take the experiences you've had and you can use those to connect and to share and to become more human, more connected to the people around you.
Beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the trailer for Dark Night of Our Soul, which should launch by spring of 2023. But if you go to the website in the description below, you can view it early. Today, we have with us a lovely couple, Jeff and Jess Depatie. Now, Jessica Depatie is a shadow work educator, a host of Shadow Work Library podcast, and a new documentary filmmaker who has a passion for exploring altered states, taboo spirituality, which I have a little curiosity around that, and honoring the ancient ways in the modern world. Now, Jeff Depatie is a former JTF2 combat sniper and is currently the chief course architect of the Special Forces experience. As a former Tier 1 Special Forces soldier, Depatie has refocused his form of service basically to dedicate his life to exploring the problem of PTSD and how we can turn life's adversities into opportunities for new life and personal growth. Because what's braver than risking your life for man and country? diving into your inner world, ready to face it head on. To heal and expand yourself will affect multiple generations after us, and it's the long-term solution to our world's greatest problems. I got that from the website that is in the show notes below. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a beautiful conversation about healing, what that means, and in what ways our past can be beautiful fertilizer for the world to come. Let's get them in here on the Ben Stewart Podcast. And we're back. Ladies and gentlemen, Jessica and Jeff Depatie. Now, I'm hoping I'm saying that last name correctly. Did I get it?
That is the most interesting way I've ever heard anyone pronounce our last name. I think you won. It's Depatie or Depatie, but Depatie is cool too.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the origin?
It's French,
of the name?
Depatie.
Gotcha.
France, once upon a time, yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time for this show today. It's really beautiful to have you, and that was really a stunning trailer to a documentary, and it's your first documentary. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, it is. You know, I've been doing podcasts for, I would say, probably 7 years now. Not myself, but being a contributor to some amazing shows like Barbell Shrugged and other ones. And so this was, this is my first documentary with Jeff, first one for myself as well, but it really felt like a fantastic next step. But it is truly a world that we're new in. So we're just sponging up everything we can around this type of media.
Well, it looks like you definitely understand what a film, like a documentary like this, needs to have. And I love the balance that I felt just from what I was watching right there. I would love to dive into a few questions around it. But the one thing that I noticed right away was, for one, you had Joseph Campbell, and I think that was the Bill Moyers interview, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just used that, just a piece of that for one of my previous posts on social media, as well as one of my deeper dives or awakening protocols. So it's interesting to see that footage. And also a friend of mine, Naco, that you interviewed him. I think that's really beautiful. I think it was also very timely for this kind of a topic. So I would love to launch into, either of you feel free to start. What caused for this film to be the one that you wanted to make as far as making a film? Like, why did you choose film was the best way above, let's say, writing a book? And yeah, let's just start there. Film, and what brought you to this film specifically?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, Ben, like anything in the true nature of reality, the genesis is kind of hard to find, right? Nothing's linear. We started a project called The Process under the guise of the Special Forces experience, which was always intended to expand consciousness. That's what it was, the driving force. The driving force was the concept of intentionally facilitating post-traumatic growth, doing it on purpose in order to expand, grow your consciousness. And then over time, as we prove this model, because we kind of started from a concept, one, attaching the word intentional to post-traumatic growth. Most people don't even know what post-traumatic growth means. They don't even know about the beautiful side of why we stress ourselves. And we were there late one night. We had been approached, actually, from a few production companies. They wanted to turn our program into a show, like another just mindless waste of time show on TV. And we didn't want anything to do with that, to be quite frank. We weren't going to add to the noise. But it did get us starting to think about it, like, okay, well, there's an appetite somewhere in here. There's an appetite. What do we want that appetite to be around? And then, like I said, as we proved the model, we proved that you can do this on purpose. We proved that you can move out of adversity to be stronger, not be stuck there. We're like, hey, we need to start delivering this message to the world, because post-traumatic growth is the start. But as you've already discovered, most people don't even know that word, post-traumatic growth. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is just starting to get traction. It's starting to fall into our neuropsychosphere, if you will, right? It's starting to become part of the human story. and it's time to tell the other half. And I would say that's kind of where we started. And then there's really not too much other than experience. You know, experience is the mother of all teachers, but film gives you multiple sensory inputs. You can put it across a wide swath relatively cheaply. There's all kinds of means. Like right now, human beings are just like soaking up content at a rate that's never been before. And it became a no-brainer. The sticking points were, okay, who's going to produce this? And we're like, okay, well, we're going to produce this. And it's like, okay, well, you know, not to downplay, but like, I'm not a producer. You know, I've never really worked in film. My film training is like recon work for the military. So I'd say somewhere in there was the start point.
Yeah, yeah. And when we were putting the process together, our event, I guess if I could back it up and say it a different way, we were looking for a term that really encompassed why people do hard things on purpose. Because when Jeff went through selection and when he had his military career as a Tier 1 sniper in the Canadian Special Forces, you know, they hear a lot about PTSD. And it's obviously something that's really important to know about and to understand ways to navigate those injuries that come from the military or just in the general public, you know, when we have trauma or a series of little traumas, what that can do to our nervous system on the other side. But in our conversations, or rather I'd say, and in our conversations, we found that a lot of those traumas also resulted in, Jeff in particular, just in that context, he felt like he understood himself better in a certain kind of way. He felt that he had more gratitude for life and he appreciated his relationships more. And so like there was this other kind of like elevated experience that happened as a result of that, not despite it. So that's what we really wanted to discover. And so we were hunting around online and we came across this term, post-traumatic growth, that was named by a couple of researchers, psychologists, Tedeschi and Calhoun. And they were studying this phenomena to understand, is it a phenomena? Is it something that people intuit? What is it about two people that can experience the same exact thing? And one goes to, let's say, drugs and prostitution, and the other goes to becoming an advocate and, you know, starting a center. Like, what is that? I don't know if they just like got old or funding ran out, but that term is sort of petered out over the years. And so when we came across that, we're like, holy smokes, like, let's take this baton and run with it. And so that was the more or less some of the genesis around how we got to really loving this topic and planting our flag and wanting to commit so much of our lives to it.
I think it's so all encompassing, because if I could just echo some of what I'm hearing about this, is that it reminds me of when in the 4-Hour Workweek, Tim Ferriss starts talking about stress and eustress. Mm-hmm. And eustress would be that stress that we willingly take on, we rise to the occasion of. So it's an aspect of consciousness more than it is an externalized aspect of reality that we have no control over. I think, Jeff, you said on purpose. There's something about, as you were also saying, Jessica, that, you know, why do people do hard things on purpose? That's the eustress. That's intent. That's like, in a smaller level, going to the gym or rock climbing, El Capitan or something along those lines. It could even be parenting. I'm in the throes of that. And so saying yes to it and not feeling beaten by it, it kind of makes me feel that two people could go through the same kind of stress, and one may turn to drugs, one may turn to try and just forgetting about it or glazing over it, or even turning it into, placing it in a different category rather than just seeing it for what it might already be. And seeing it for what it might be is kind of like a child who witnesses a car wreck. Yeah, maybe that's too early for a child, but at some point, the child does realize we all die, and this is some of the ways that you do die, and eventually you can unstick that process. So I kind of feel like when people call it post-traumatic stress disorder, there's a little responsibility on the individual to either say like, I am going to engage with this and open up to what this is, or I'm going to run away from it. And maybe it's not even a conscious thing or a decision, but and correct me if I'm wrong, but like, you know, if you would put it in this way, it seems like maybe the post-traumatic growth is just a psychological orientation saying, well, whatever this is, I'm going to look for what good may come from it. You know, it may be, you know, a sack of shit, but, you know, beautiful things grow from that fertilizer.
Yeah. Well, I would start with what I believe in the nature of reality is that everything's paradoxical. So that's where perspective, attitude, point of view can come in, where you can look at it like this is just a pile of shit or it's the fertilizer. And that's where it starts, right? Everybody has a choice. But there's also an external environment that puts so much pressures on us. Most human beings don't really comprehend the amount of filtration that their brain is doing to validate their own ego, if you will, meaning their subroutine coding that runs over and over. And that's usually what happens is as people get stressed, which most people on planet Earth are stressed, they're constricted. They're not thriving human beings. They're living a half-life, you know, a shell of an existence, if we put it really bluntly. When you're constricted down, your brain doesn't allow for new thoughts, new patterning to happen. It closes down the nodes. And so some people, their environment makes it very easy to continue that constriction. You know, their buddies might drink, or their wife might be abusive, or their husband might be abusive. There's a lot of things that can add. So you have this an event that is acutely stressful. And it doesn't matter if it's acute or chronic. Stress is stress. Your nervous system will shut down eventually. But it also has the potential, just like you mentioned at the gym, you know, you go, you stress out your muscles, your nervous system has the same potential to heal up. Same with your brain. So yeah, kind of the paradoxical nature of that choice where someone collapses in on themselves and reinforces it. Because as long as you're kind of breathing, the ego says, I'm alive. Because most people don't know, oh, I'm not thriving, I'm just alive.
Yeah, if I could add on to that, it's a really complicated topic. You know, trauma is so interesting because it shows up for all of us differently, and it comes into our lives differently, meaning comes into our life looking like dad used to beat me, or it comes into life, dad picked me up late from school too many times. Now I have abandonment issues. You know, it's like, it just looks so different for everybody. And the way that we react to that is so different. And through our research for this docu-series, we found that it's not PTSD or PTG, it's both. It's happening at the same time. You know, our lives are so like twisty turny that to say that you're making a choice to be down a spiraled path or you're making a choice to grow, it would just be too reductionist. But for the sake of, I guess, not simplicity, but like digestibility.
Well, just to hold your thought though, left brain thinking kicks in and it wants a line, it wants A to B. And that's how most people think, right? Our language reinforces it. So that's why it seeks that. Most people don't know how to really think from the right brain.
Right. So it's hard to create a film that encompasses the ungraspable and the unknowable. I think you did a great job on that with Psychedelica, by the way, which is an impossible topic. But this is another one of these impossible topics that it's controversial in the sense that when you are experiencing PTS, and I think it was a couple years ago, they dropped the D. So it's PTS now. When you're experiencing those symptoms, there's no judgment. Like, you could be a very growth-oriented person and have that stress disorder or whatever it is. It's just, we really do need to actively seek out the meaning in our suffering, in that trauma. Because like Richard Rudd had said in that trailer, if any of you had caught that so beautifully, like there's so much wisdom in our shadows, in the darkness that has been gifted to us more or less. And that's not to condone what's happened in the past if it happened at you or to you, but how we approach it and how we react to it afterwards needs to be something that we actively seek. Like, that's something that we found with the people that we interviewed, was growth didn't just happen. Meaning didn't just happen. They had to actively, proactively go find it.
Yeah. And meaning doesn't actually mean what's his name from the concentration camps?
Viktor Frankl.
Yes. Not everything has meaning. There's a great saying, by one of the guys in the doc. He says, sometimes I just want my oatmeal to be oatmeal. And sometimes your oatmeal is just that. And the lesson is forgiveness. Like that's a Jesus level lesson, right? True forgiveness that's a high vibrational expression of love, in fact, for yourself and for that other person. So because I caution people who are like, okay, well, what's the A to B here in terms of the meaning, right? What's that consilience between my experience and where I'm supposed to go? Because I think, as mental health rises, the issues of it rise, as the complexity of man's world, the human world rise, we have to kind of drop the equal sign. The point of like, this is this and this is this, where we start using multidimensional thinking, the next level of it, to say, yeah, okay, it's both. It's both somehow. Oh boy, that's so hard for most people to try to render, because almost all around the world, we're put into systems that teach us more left brain thinking, more A to B, right? It's easier to be on a straight line than it is on this, like, that's why we like the lightning bolt in the doc, because it's all right. One path is the path of least resistance. And that's the whole point of intentional PTG, is to find the razor's edge, right? Straight as the gate and narrow is, or what is it? Straight is the gate and narrow is the path. Mm-hmm. And that, we're talking about your psyche, your soul's purpose, right? And that's what we started to discover with this post-traumatic growth concept. You mentioned Joseph Campbell, and if I don't link the two, I'll forever regret it. The hero's journey resonates with everyone. Some people might be like, well, semantically this and that, but there's no one who's like, no, that's wow, that's the human experience in story form. That's the map for story. It turns out that post-traumatic growth overlays perfectly on that. And either circumstantial, you're thrust into the underworld because of the world around you, or you can do it on purpose. And the beauty of doing it on purpose is when circumstantial stress happens, physiologically through science, they can show multifaceted ways that it makes you stronger. It allows you to dig into Pandora's box and find hope. And yeah, obviously we're quite passionate about it because it's really beautiful,
Well, I love it, and there's such a mythopoetic element that you bring to it that shows you embodied that the path is not linear, and that doesn't mean it's completely not linear, like it's devoid of linearity. It just means that I like how you use the word paradox instead of contradiction, because oftentimes we look at paradox as being contradictory, and contradiction is something that the two sides of something that contradicts one another, they cancel each other out. But paradox can live simultaneously side by side. The only thing that requires of it is we remove the limitations by which we've been viewing it to see that this paradox, what makes one seem like if this is happening, the other can't be, is really our mindset. And it's not just move from this model of thinking to that model of thinking, because again, that's linear. It's actually crack open, see both at the same time. Claire Graves would say, climbing that, well, it wasn't Claire Graves. I think it might've been Ken Wilber who took the spiral dynamics and showed it as a ladder. Mm-hmm. And we take everything we've experienced with us. So it's not like we bury it in the backyard and we forget about it forever. There's an element to all that we've dealt with in our past. And I appreciate that. What I'm hearing from you is also why you made a film, because you can get into that mythopoetic element without needing to make it so on the nose and like a to-do list. A to-do list is kind of what you were saying, like, well, how do I get from A to B? Just give me the formula. Well, the formula also insinuates that you must engage with it to understand how you are the hero in this journey. I want to dive into a little bit more of your context of why this is particularly meaningful to both of you. So, and we can go as deep as you want to go on your own path, but just a little bit of showing how even if both of your paths kind of collide for some reason like this, but what's the context for this being such a meaningful topic for the both of you to make a film about something like this?
Jeez.
You want to go first?
Yeah. Well,
I can.
Yeah, no, I got this.
Okay.
So for my personal life, just very quickly, I was a marketer in my previous life, this lifetime, but before this. And I mean, what marketing 101 is, when you tell the story of someone or a product, you find the grit, you find the friction point. My life used to look like this and now it looks like this, right? That's just like the most basic kind of equation. And when I was just a little marketing baby, I was diving into that and I was like, what is my story? And my story was really obvious. I went to a really small Catholic school and I basically had no friends from, I think, like 3rd grade to 8th grade. I was in complete isolation. I was just a weird kid and I was just deemed as somebody who nobody talked to. And I didn't know how to navigate that. I likely victimized myself in that situation now in hindsight, but at the time I was just hanging in there, right? And during that time, I would say after that time, when I decided I was going to reinvent myself, I was going to learn how to speak, I was going to learn how to be the gregarious person that I thought I was, but never had this opportunity to explore for myself. I realized that in that transformation, I learned so much about myself by being the underdog, by being the little guy. I learned how to listen. My mouse whiskers were just finely tuned. I can walk into a room and kind of sense what was going on because I didn't speak so much, because I didn't have that much communication coming from myself. And so that became part of my story. And as I learned more and more about how I could resolve that bullying issue of mine, it's like, man, I'm like so glad that happened, because I have so many soft skills that I've learned in that period of time. And it was just, okay, like this is my story now. And it was part of my healing story as well, to like really feel some appreciation over that time instead of like this anguish. And so I learned that early on, that the tough experiences that happen in one's life can be very beneficial. And that was just a sort of mantra that ran through my life as I experienced more and more bits of adversity. Nothing crazy, just, growing up, going to college, putting myself in interesting situations, dangerous situations. And it blossomed into giving me this entrepreneurial spirit, this sense of bravery to be able to go for things that a younger version of me wouldn't have, because she didn't know how much she could get through. And so later on in my, I would say late 20s, I met Jeff. And so maybe you want to take your PTG story there. And then it just blossomed from there when we met, but I guess we can pick that up in a bit.
Yeah, well, when we met, it was magic word here, Ben, is we fell in love. We both finally knew what real fucking crack your skull open, shake up the snow globe revelation that love can bring, right? Some people get it through psychedelics. Some people are blessed enough to open up the Holy Grail and be bathed in the light of God and watch it change you, right? So that did happen. To back up though, I was a seeker all my life. When I was a little guy, I said, I'm on my quest for knowledge. That's how I was 7 or something. I'm questing for knowledge. And eventually I learned, I'm a seeker, okay. And that went in. And then I realized, I'm a pilgrim on my road to enlightenment. That's what I'm actually trying to do. Enlightenment is just another word for expanding your consciousness, eventually moving to full undifferentiated consciousness, dipping into the Akasha, touching God, whatever you want to.
I have to interrupt you here really quick. So Jeff tells this, and anybody watching might be like, maybe he's over exaggerating. So when I went to his parents' house, I was going through some of his old journals that he would have when he was just a little guy. And they were so mind blowing. Just he's trying to solve the world's problems and stuff. Mm. So truly, he was so weird when he was younger, an old man in a little kid's body.
Well, and that's what I did though. I stepped into service. Eventually I thought service was joining the military because I didn't know about capital S service. No one educated me on that. School left that one out. And then eventually I became a tier 1 operator. So just for the Americans who are listening, your combat application group or Delta Force or SEAL Team 6, I was in the Canadian equivalent. We worked with those kinds of units. And that's the pinnacle of performance, if you will, all the government's money, all the professionals in the world. And I started to see that lots of these expansions can happen on purpose through practice, through learning through drills, right? Anyhow, get out, meet Jess, and we start learning that because a lot of people are scared to say that you can expand consciousness on purpose. A lot of people say that it only fluoresces on its own timings. And in some ways that's true, but it's also completely not true. Meaning you can set the conditions, right? Say a flower is ready to bloom. Well, if you have no dirt, the flower's not going to bloom. If you don't water it, the flower's not going to bloom, right? There's some things that, celestially will trigger the flower to bloom, whatever the environment and stuff. People are very much the same way. What happened though is on this road, it becomes very evident that you can only expand. There's a reason the Buddha and Jesus and all of them went to caves and super secluded spots to have their deep enlightenments, because other people are, quantumly entangled with us. They're just literally mechanically entangled with us, socially entangled with us. And if they aren't expanding with you, you reach a certain level and you have to accept that you're just going to kind of take the Bodhisattva path. And, we're both deeply charitable folks, I think. Like, not charitable as in giving, but
just kind of like obsessed with being service oriented. I don't know where that came from, but it was just like something I think we were born with. And then when we met each other, like Jeff was talking about falling in love, what a powerful altered state to be in for an extended period of time, that honeymoon phase that they call it, or even a breakup. I mean, gosh, a relationship with somebody else that can change everything about the way that you do life. And we were both at this point in our lives where we didn't know it. It was a subconscious thing, but we were ready to just like do something big. And the day that I met Jeff, I was like, I really don't want to be a military wife. Like he was still in the military. I was like, if this works, like you're going to have to like not be in the military anymore, but I think I had told you psychically, I was like, don't worry, we're gonna do something super cool too after. But yeah, like in the months following, when we were still in that altered state, I mean, the ability to create and to be like tuned into what really matters in life, at least for us, was super heightened. And
life wasn't in black and white. It was like in vivid color now, it became more dimensional.
And luckily we intuited somehow that this was the perfect time to create something that would be super meaningful for us. And that's where the process came about, and post-traumatic growth, just really became our thing. It's how we've lived our relationship. God, our vacations are like so hard. Like we'll go skiing and Jeff will just drop me off at the top of some black diamond mountain and I don't know how to ski, it's like just kind of the way we do things.
But also deep into our own psychosphere, when we're rooting up shadows, it's not just about external stuff. I do have to say this before we lose the track.
Go ahead.
I think the magic word, Ben, it's about love. It's about eternal love, God level love, right? We move up through the dimensions of love. And I think that's always the guiding light. And the more you move towards it, the more it moves towards you. And it's this beautiful alignment that happens. And then the subtle nature of reality starts to not just work for you as if it's working for you, but it's like, once you become of those levels of service, everything starts to fall into place. And it's been so magical. Like, I don't want to go down too many of the rabbit holes of it.
No, but I will like tie up this story.
Yeah.
We're currently separated. And that's why like I flew to Toronto for this and we're running our event in the next couple of days. It's like we are a lived experiment of post-traumatic growth because it's super hard. We love each other so much. And yet this is a point in our lives where we're not supposed to be together. And maybe that's the completion of our romantic relationship, or maybe this is the space that we need to find ourselves. We don't know. But we knew that when we took on post-traumatic growth as a third pole, as a north or a guiding, like our mission, as the purpose of our relationship, like this is our child, we're childless, but this is our child, our creation. We knew that the universe was gonna be like, oh yeah, will you really, like, do you really want to know about what PTG is about? Like, let me throw at you some serious stuff and see how you're going to deal with it. So we're like playing out the play of PTG right now. And it's very exciting and hard and fun.
Well, I mean, I appreciate the being candid and also really just opening up there. It is really interesting, these twists and turns through lives, relationships changing. And also what's interesting there is I was in the military. It was 6 years. I was in the Air Force. And also with my wife, I remember that defining moment in our life. It wasn't just beauty from the start. It was like worlds colliding and mayhem straight from the start. Both of our egos were, I could say, completely dismantled, not saying none of it came back, but completely dismantled within a few months. And it was just very interesting because there wasn't ever a doubt that this was love. And then there was an absolute reason beyond what she and I could even conceive of back then. And, what's interesting about it is like we've been traveling this same road together, not just having our own children, but also creating together. And film, I've found, I think it was even, there's like 3 or 4 of those old, Stephen Covey or, I'm forgetting some of the other names, but the productivity, 7 highly effective habits of successful people. There's this concept that your artistic creations do take your sexual and life force energy. They do take much of the same cosmic energy that you would see out there, in the cosmos that creates a new star. It happens within us. And there's something about creativity that I find really magical about that, because I'm always in the process of it, being a filmmaker, and right before that being in the music industry as well. And with that, when I left music to be in film, I won't go into the nuances of what I found really to be different between those two worlds, but there was a lot of what I learned just as the way that you kind of get by, how you communicate with musicians as opposed to people in film primarily. There was an aspect of it that I felt that I was missing until I realized there's none of it that I actually have ever given up. And where this leads me into the segue is you interviewed Naco. So it was in 2018, the very end of 2018. I went up to, I was just south of Portland where Naco lives, hung out with him for a while with my wife when our twin boys were still in the belly. And just an incredible person. And we kept in touch for a while. There was a film I did with Pete Evans where I used one of his songs. And currently the film that's about to release with Aubrey Marcus, Awake in the Darkness, also has a song of his in there. So very much so connected to my relationship with my wife. But then it was obviously 2020 when we heard, basically Trevor Hall made a post and word got out that he needed some healing. He needed some help. And I was curious, even for me, I was going to say, like, I think this guy may need to speak it out, may need to use his voice. The same thing that garnished all this attention, use the voice to really like sing some of the pain out. And I'm super interested to hear how that interview went, how you put it in the documentary. But I guess the segue into a question was, what was it that landed you in contact with Naco, and why did you think he would be a very relevant person for this specific film?
Can I answer the first part?
Yeah,
and
go
you
ahead.
Answer the second part of like how the interview went?
Yeah.
Well, it becomes very clear that, the energetic exchange that life is, right? Whether it's through matter or electromagnetic spectrum or whatever you want to call it, everything is an interaction and everything has some level of multidimensional cause and effect. Music is one of those things. We very much discovered as someone cycling through the underworld, or not even the underworld, just cycling through life, even if it's like a baseline kind of measurement. It can be very caustic, the sounds you put into your head, or it can be very healing, right? And our first experience with Naco was actually our first daime, or ayahuasca ceremony. It was a song that was played after they stopped playing live music. It was one of the first songs, Aloha Keakura.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very obvious that like Naco wrote that from a place of revelation, or a wise place to say the least. And Jess will go into the interview, but we definitely wanted to hear from his experiences and all that kind of stuff. He's an interesting man, to say the least. And yes, that timing came up where he was going through a bit of his own dark night. And yeah, you want to talk about the interview?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I really appreciated about Naco and navigating that situation, the cancel Naco moment, was his patience. You know, he didn't react right away, or he sat with it and he learned about himself and he listened to what people were saying, and whether or not this or that is true, you know, I don't think that's what we're talking about here. What I think is important to explore is, regardless, that was a dark night. That was a pit of shit that he was in. And what did he do? He reached out to somebody that, like mentors and guides. And I thought that was really wonderful. You know, it wasn't this like, oh, this never happened or anything. It was really like a wise way to deal with a like complicated situation. And in the interview, I mean, he's told his origin story multiple times. And that was interesting, of course, because it has a lot to do with post-traumatic growth. I mean, his upbringing is really fascinating. But then also currently being in that dark night again, the wisdom that he had gained from those tough times of his childhood were like really bubbling up. Like there were skills, there were tools he's pulling out of his pocket. Like, how can I survive this? How can I thrive? How can I turn my dark night into the dawn of somebody else's day? And I'm not going to take credit for that line. That was something that Rick Alexander wrote for our narration. I wish I could, because it sounded so sick. But the interview was really good. And another thing that I recognized was just how much of his soul he puts into his music. You know, when you interview a musician, that's one thing. When you hear their art form, they've chosen that medium because that is the way that their heart sings. So while hearing the words from Naco, it was very interesting because I had never watched an interview of Naco. I didn't know him as a person before I sat down in front of him. And I had this like thought or this expectation of how he was going to be. But you know him, Ben, he's a weirdo. Like, he's so silly and like just so fun. And he comes off so different than these like deep spiritual songs that like have just broken my heart open. Yeah, so the whole experience was really fun, and he'll always have such a great place in my heart.
Yeah, I want to leave it for the doc a certain couple parts, but I do want to touch on a few things. There was this really beautiful timeline that kind of collapsed in. So he kindly volunteered to do a pro bono show for people who are recovering drug addicts in Georgia. And this is like kind of, you know, backwoods white kind of America. And it was really interesting because it was on the Trail of Tears, which is where the natives were driven out of like Florida, Georgia and all that. And here we go full circle. And here's, a man who's part native giving his medicine back into this circle. And it was one of the oddest, you know, when you see something and you're like, okay, my brain cannot fully compute what is happening here, but it's beautiful. It was one of those. And, it was beautiful. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was interesting. It was funny. It was heartfelt. It was all kinds of stuff. But I do want to quickly give one practical tool. Jess said, Naco did something that's like super intelligent. When people start constricting in, you know, we talked about the paradoxical nature of the reality. Usually when stuff constricts in, it simultaneously repels everything away. And that includes other people. And one of the many, but probably one of the simple but most interesting lessons we learned. It doesn't matter if you use psychedelics. It doesn't matter what psychedelic, really. It doesn't matter if you use VR. It doesn't ADMR, psychotherapy, like the whole gamut, whatever it is. Almost all the time, it begins with the interaction with another human being. There's something so powerful, right? Especially in this day and age when we're highly wired but highly disconnected. to connect with someone. There's like this beautiful capacity to, well, raise your vibration again, make sense of things, even if it's just like an echo chamber. It doesn't even matter. Ideally, you're not around people who are going to echo chamber you, but sometimes that's all you need is just your words reinforced. That was something really interesting because most people don't know how to be vulnerable. And, you know, as you're kind of chasing ex animo or ex anima, you know, living from your heart or soul, you're going to need to be vulnerable. That's literally what courage is. And yeah, guys like Naco, everybody we interviewed, they knew how to do that.
That's beautiful. And I definitely want to move this along. I just want to also share that when I went and visited Naco, it was after seeing him in, it was the Four Corners Festival down at the Four Corners area of Colorado. And Pete Evans connected me with him. And when I went down there with my family, my daughter was with me. He instantly picked my daughter up, held her, walked around with her, brought us backstage, asked me what my favorite song was. I said, "Wash It Away." I would love to hear that. And he said it wasn't on the song list, but you know what? I got you. And in the middle of that set, it was just him on piano. The rest of the band left the stage, and he sang that song, just piano. And I sat there, like, my daughter was on this kind of like, you know, bouncy, springy horse thing right next to me at age, she must have been 3.5 or something like that. And I'm sitting here like blubbering like a little kid right next to her while she's like laughing, singing with joy. And it was just one of the most perfect moments of my life because there was my wife over there, you know, with twins in the belly. And this was our intro into the world of Naco. And yes, we saw right away that there's a goofy little child inside that man. And I hope that never leaves. And there's just such a beauty there. And then we stayed with him for several days up at his house. And every single morning he would take my daughter out to, you know, feed his horses out on his property. And he was so like we all have skeletons in the closet, you could say, or things that we need to heal from. And much of the time, the way we heal from that is it comes to the surface and we're seen. And that being seen, especially for people who are in the public eye, is part of what I feel forces some of that vulnerability, which is beautiful because there wasn't the ability to run from it. So there was just this, okay, how do I do what I've always done, which is do what I do for the people, medicine for the people? How do I turn, this is almost like a Shiva type moment where Shiva swallows the poison that was meant to poison the world, turned his skin blue, but that was a gift, you know, as well as a curse. So there was something of this transmuting this poison and turning it into a teachable moment for the world that I thought was absolutely brilliant. To move forward from Naco, I would love to hear what other, let's say, curveballs. I want to hear from some of the other interviews that you had done. What surprised you in the form of an answer to one of the questions that maybe you hadn't seen it that way, or maybe it really helped you in your lives?
The one that comes to mind is Dr. Yoko Nomura. She is an epigeneticist out of New York, and she, what is she? She's a developmental epigeneticist, which basically means she will study like all of these different phases of life to see how we evolve, more or less. I'm just ruining that, but it's a complicated thing that she does. She's also Japanese. A Japanese American. And I forget what question we had asked her. Maybe it was kind of a curveball thing because we're talking about epigenetics with her, but just she had so much wisdom. And so the interview just went in a different way. And yeah, that's her right there. And she was explaining that in the East, if you want to heal something, you add more good. Where in the West, we focus on what's bad and we try to get rid of it, right? And she had this beautiful just image of we used some watercolor imagery in our trailer to sort of evoke what she was explaining to us. But if you have a pool of white paint and you have a black spot in the middle, sometimes it's easier to just keep adding more white paint until that black spot just disappears or gets pushed out, rather than trying to grab at that black spot, and get it even more messy. Did I say that right? It's something that.
Yeah. Like a painting, if you were to see the black spot, you add more white. Of course, it's both, and she knows that. 100%.
And so I thought that was really interesting in terms of when we talk about doing the inner work. I know that myself specifically, I teach shadow work, so I'm looking at we can call the black. I know in their traditional it's black and white, but that like gritty bit, like we focus on that. But in the East, it's like, well, okay, that may always be there, but what more goodness can I add into my life so that doesn't really matter so much anymore? I was like, dude, that's so simple, but that was cool to hear.
Yeah, especially when it comes to, so I don't know how familiar the audience is with epigenetics, but epigenetics are the control elements that sit on top of your DNA. So when your DNA replicates and stuff like that, or if it fires and genes are expressed, epigenetics is the short-term effect on that, right? Not genetics, but epigenetics. And what's cool is if mother is highly stressed and she has a baby in utero, that can be passed on. So your story about Naco, the music, all beautiful, really serene, I just could just think of like their epigenetics firing really well, right? And the idea is that your protein expression can be either like healthy proteins or like prions and stuff like that. And it was...
I don't know where you're going with this.
You distracted me, sorry. She blinded me with her smile, Ben. It's surprising how much, we can inherit and change. But the point on that one is everybody right now is pretty gung-ho about kind of DSM model focusing on those shadows. Mm-hmm. And some of them, yes, you have to, because you got to figure out where that drive is coming from. You mentioned about sexual energy. Most of what we do is bring in energy to put out sexual energy in some form. As humans, we have beautiful expressions of that. And there's a fine line between desire, expressing it in a low vibrational fear mentality and not. And this is really just me kind of like beating around the bush, because to boil down one moment, I don't know how you did that. I think time and time again, though, one of the things that surprised me, because we started with post-traumatic growth, and the concept of growth goes to consciousness, and consciousness always goes to some level of God. And whether it was like from someone who was highly scientific or whatnot, that the conversation goes there, and we're at this beautiful cusp as a species. The more we can collectively expand our consciousness, the more we'll be able to not answer it because we need to understand God or ever could really, but it's like how many people use that word or words to describe that, and kind of a vindication to all the old religions and stuff like that, in their most beautiful, pure forms. It was nice to see that. That was really beautiful to see the wisdom in all that, right?
Yeah, it's almost like everyone spoke a very similar language, even though they were very different ages, very different upbringings and bits of expertise. It was like crazy, the range of people that were brought in for this film. And I say brought in, like we went out to go seek them, but it was really like the clues were there to find the perfect people for this. It was just so effortless to find this crew, this cast and crew of amazing humans. But yeah, they use similar words. Like they're not even from the same parts of the country. It was weird, right? Like they just tapped into this other type of language. And I feel like we got them all in the same room and everybody like best friends, as like different as everyone was.
Without, you're I don't know how you approach your docs, but we approached it kind of two-prong, right? Inductively and deductively. We wanted to do it inductively as much as possible. We didn't want to guide them into that language. So we avoided that a lot. And it was just neat to see it naturally go there, how, the talk of the precipice, of the big human metamorphosis as I look at your butterfly is coming. And to know that people all over the world are feeling that pressure to bust out of their cocoon was really quite interesting.
Sorry about that. That was because I heard some kids upstairs. What's really beautiful about that is the way that I make films is it's different and the same every single film. And I can at least say every single film that I work on, I'm still asking myself the same questions over and over and over again, because I'm mining them deeper. You know, like I'm still discovering how I make films, every film that I make. And the current one that I'm on is the prime example of it. I'm working on a film that has an immediate topic that I wouldn't have chosen first. And I'll just leave it at, it's about money. I would not have chosen that first, but to mine how money connects into the human condition, connects into human consciousness, how it does connect all the way down to nature, not just the liquidation of nature, but our consciousness, how we utilize it. So what's interesting is a lot of the times I'll write out several scripts and I'll trash them all every single time. I'll just trash the script. And I'm never really going back to zero when I trash the script, because I know what I'm not doing. And I also know a little bit like, well, that must stay. That's a definite part of it. So it really is, it's almost like this process of life where sometimes you feel like you're doing the same things over and over again, or you're experiencing the same traumas, or you're just on some kind of a wheel, when in fact, it kind of seems like history doesn't repeat fully, but it rhymes. So every single time I make a film, what's interesting about it is I'm instructing part of the film, but really all I'm doing is being taught by the film, and I'm putting it into a language that makes sense in the audiovisual format. I love making music. I love the soundtrack. I love sound design. I love animations and toying with metaphorical ways to say what you want to say, so you don't have to go on the nose. I really believe that that's the mythopoetic way of doing it. And then if you have a soundbite where it's like, damn, you just got to say it on the nose, that's perfect, then awesome. But the film is almost the baby, if you will. It's the one that's kind of deciding where it's going. And I'm also very curious, you know, we've been talking about the content, maybe the philosophical content that some of the interviewees would have been talking about in the film. But I would love to know now, what surprised you about the filmmaking process, even down to the nuts and bolts, being challenged with, I know when I was like, right before Gordon stepped in and started helping me with all the tech stuff with websites and merchant accounts and stuff like that, I was beating my head on the wall, just like, this is not my gift. This is not my expertise. God, I hate this. And all the while I knew deep down inside, I was like, there's a reason you have to experience this. There's a reason you have to go through this and toil, you know, in this for quite some time. And it just felt like, what am I going to need these nuts and bolts for? Once I find somebody to do it, I'm never going to want to do it again. And here on this side of it, I won't go into it, but I see it was more can you stick with something that's uncomfortable without feeling you need to capitalize on it or monetize it or somehow feel like, oh, I won, I got a gift, I got a goodie from this process, but just allowing for it to be what it is. I would love to know your stories, both of yours, on becoming a filmmaker during this process and what surprised you in that realm.
Well, I would say we brought some very interesting strengths as a team. So there's three of us that are, I guess you could say, the core production team. And then we have this amazing writer, Rick Alexander, and we have an amazing production assistant, Ashley Mays. And who else do we have?
Richard Rudd is our narrator.
Yeah, Richard Rudd's freaking narrating it from the Gene Keys, which was a huge blessing. But for the three of us, you know, we traveled around the US and then to London for Rudd. And so it was interesting because, you know, with my background in marketing and PR and, you know, a few other things, I was able to understand how to pitch, right? And that was the magic that I brought. And then past that, I was like, I don't know how to take a picture, you know? I know how to create a good story, kind of, you know? I'm always getting better at it every day. But I don't know how to put a picture together. And that's where Luke came in. So Luke Montgomery, or Zachariah Montgomery, he's this up-and-coming cinematographer out of Toronto, and he is just amazing. And he brought the camera skills and the editing skills and his eye for aesthetics in a way that's like, I don't know how you would say, it's just like he's ethereal. He's just like this ethereal human. And so he brought this like angsty artistry to it. And then with Jeff's background and this lived experience of PTG, and also like his very tactical way of managing a group of people, like we were showing up, all the equipment was there. We knew how to run through. We did after action reviews and we did set up things. It was like so militant and fun. We felt like we were in this filmmaker special forces boot camp. And so we made for an interesting group. And to add on to that, we realized, okay, all of our backgrounds are so different, but they're all so valuable. So in the interview process, we did something different than I think is normal, where each of us interviewed each applicant. So it would start off with me. I'm the warm, fuzzy one. I'm going to get into, what was your life like? Like, let's get into that stuff. And then Luke would come in and, we'd switch spots and the whole energy of the room would change. Actually, you would come in next. And Jeff has more of like an interrogator style of interviewing, which had people kind of like sitting on the edge of their seats a little bit, and like straightening up. And it was like a really cool shift in the energy of like, okay, now like it's your mission to get your message across. And then Luke would come in after that and the energy again would change. It's more like artistic sort of tender but edgy questioning. And I think it created some cool answers because it was like a very different way of collecting information than I think we were expecting. So that was neat. One of the most surprising things about this process for me has been the vast amount of confusion around what it actually takes to get a film to distribution. So film festivals, in my naivete, was that they were places for independent filmmakers to share their artwork, which is true still. But I didn't realize how political it was. I didn't know that half of the films that show up in Sundance are like accounted for before applications even open up. I may have thought more naively that buyers were more interested in documentary films that really wanted to create social impact. Like perhaps that's not their number one goal. Go figure. And also that film festivals are a marketplace to sell yourself. And so like, I'm ready for it. I'm here for it. But it was like this busting of a myth of this independent filmmaker that comes in with this giant heart and this beautiful film that like, that's all you need. Yeah, I guess that's a lesson in life, but that was like an interesting one to learn. And we're working around it. To not get butthurt about that, to be like, okay, so you don't care so much about my mission that we are willing to sacrifice our romantic relationship to like make happen. Like, that's okay. We're still going to keep fighting the good fight. What about you? What was your most?
Well, it started to become very clear. So, Stephen Hawking, Einstein, through the physical world, they tried to create a formula that encompasses everything, right? It's like universal truth that's captured in a formula. Joseph Campbell, to bring him up again, came pretty close with the hero's journey as far as the human experience. But obviously you look at the hero's journey and you're like, well, I know nothing of myself now. It's kind of more like a little bit of a roadmap. And it became very apparent how like the concept of post-traumatic growth is a function of the universe. Whether it started with a god or gods or the Big Bang or nothing like that at all, or the Matrix light switch being turned on, it doesn't matter. The tendency towards complexity has always been built off the back of growth, hardship, growth. Atom smashes into atom, fusion in the sun on a big scale, or it could be a small scale. An asteroid hits the earth, it changes the dynamic and something else really grows up. And that carried over those low levels of consciousness all the way over to us. And these two expressions that sit across from each other, fear and love on a kind of scale of consciousness, Dr. David Hawking scale, are so unbelievably in control in a lot of ways. But, Eve got to bite the apple in the Garden of Eden. We've been given this custodianship over consciousness. And we are like the first ones that can do it on purpose and do it, fuck it up, or on purpose and make it
good, capital G good. And it was interesting to start to see that it was underlying almost all human issue is, in essence, and I'm using the word trauma, but don't think of it as a traditional use of trauma, that epigenetic trauma, those negative stress moments, trauma as in ill conditioning into non-coping mechanisms through childhood and adolescence into adulthood. It's people acting, because all those things, trauma, usually keep people in a somewhat fear-based mentality. Every now and then, like the gopher in spring, it pokes its head out, but that's where most people exist. And it was neat to start to see that, yes, when you were saying about money, the interaction, so we use a bit of a Lewin expression, I changed it up, but it's personality plus environment equals behavior. It's symbiotic. It is insane how much your environment impacts you, not just where you walk, how you move, the ergonomics of it, but the quantum atomic interactions that happen. And it was really amazing to start to see, like, oh man, that's why we call it the dark night of our soul. If humanity, which, most people won't have the courage to do it, because it takes courage to be like, holy man, I'm the guilty one. That's so hard. People want to blame and shame. They want to throw up the guns and be like, it was you, it was that. Oh, it's because of this, and it's like, whoa, this is the only place you can start. Control outwards is an illusion. Start at you. Where is the potential for growth? Some people want to call it healing. When you're really low in a non-coping state, we kind of call that healing up to a coping state. And then beyond the coping state is growth. That's where you have expanded your awareness and you're able to tread life differently. And you expand that complexity. But it was absolutely amazing to start to say, hey, this is underlying all this. This is, and you said like mythopoetic. We use we here in North America use English language to try to describe stuff, and it runs out real quick, right? It's very hard to describe what a beautiful painting can do. We try to think about it, like almost anything that has divine inspiration or true poetic inspiration. Truly, we've been talking about them for thousands of years, being like, oh man, how do we describe this? And it's because you can't really describe it with words, But anyways, yeah, the underlying nature of it was super beautiful.
I'll add on to that because we went to TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, and and I watch a lot of documentaries. Like, I'm a documentary person. He doesn't so much, which I think that's really helpful for him not to, because we want our film to be for people that like don't love watching documentaries all the time, like I do. And what was I getting with that? Oh, so a lot of the talks around social impact documentaries around the environment or political issues or systemic racism, it's like, it can be so overwhelming because they're just like looking at all this list of problems we have in film format. It's like, holy smokes, we have a lot of work to do. Yeah. But if we can get down to that one missing puzzle piece, it's really, we really feel like it's this, so many people are hurt, and hurt people. We've all heard of that before. And so like, we're trying to cover up this shit sandwich with other policies or this or that. But if we're not focusing on, how we can deal with some of the traumas from the past, then it's just going to be this never ending cycle.
Because it's built on it. It's built on that, those constructs, right?
Right. Like, if we do like to find the bad guy, who's the antagonist of the story. And we can look at the Koch brothers. We can look at all kinds of people. Yeah. We can look at all kinds of billionaires that have made decisions that have resulted in like bad stuff. Okay. I'll just be reductionist and say that. But like, what is it about them that has nurtured them to make those types of decisions? They're smart people. They're surrounded by smart people. So what is happening? Well, I think it's just that when you have so much power and influence, and you also have unresolved trauma that you haven't made meaning from or haven't learned from, you're just more of a dangerous person. If the guy sitting in front of me in the airplane has unresolved trauma, but he makes like, $35K a year, how much damage can that guy do beyond his lineage, which is huge, right? But then $35 billion, that guy has unresolved trauma. It's like, okay, now we're all going to point fingers, but really it's the same person, just like with more resources to mess up. So yeah, I don't even know where I was going with that.
Well, it's just, the underlying nature of it, I think, is the point we're making.
Mm-hmm. There's something really beautiful about film work, which is you know, when you were mentioning, Jeff, how there's only so many ways to use, let's say, the English language to explain a painting. What's interesting is intellectually, absolutely, and then artistically, you start getting into this territory of, you know, double entendre, triple entendre, metaphor, allegory. I remember there was this one time where Jay-Z was being interviewed, and somebody said, like, the interviewee was asking, like, you know, there's a lot of people thinking that you're part of the Illuminati. What do you have to say to that? And you know, I could care less of the truth or the not truth. The point that I'm getting at is how he used language here. He said, "No, that's a little too Tom Hanks for me." I found that really fascinating because it's just like that's not in the dictionary. You won't find that as an explanation of "Are you in the Illuminati?" But the way he used it was like, whoa, this is interesting because, like, Tom Hanks is an actor. That's too Hollywood. That's too made up. That's too fiction. It also is Tom Hanks, the Da Vinci Code. They talk about the Illuminati. It's like, nah, still, it's too Hollywood and it's too specifically, you know, that. You know, so using words in a, let's say, a pop culture way to kind of bend outside of the typical way we say things to even just catch you off guard. And I noticed that songs do this. Like, you can have a beautiful song that could sound very much so like a very cheesy ballad, but you change one instrument from a really bright sound to a very, like, low, ominous, haunting sound. And you have the same lyrics saying the same thing that would be cheesy, and then all of a sudden it has this haunting or ominous undertone to it. It changes the whole thing. In the same way, if you were to have the, you know, let's say the Mona Lisa, and let's say a lot of people point out, what is this thing behind? Is it a UFO, you know, behind the Mona Lisa? Well, let's just say you put it right out in front and it was just clear to see that is a flying saucer. That, even though all you did was you took the same thing and made it a little bit easier to see, you changed the entire meaning of that entire painting. And so what I love about this is we are using language to crack through some of the rigidity of the way we utilize language to build our neurology. And that's what I love about film. That's what I love about poetry and music, is there are ways to supersede those blockages and the red flags that we put up towards our own healing. A lot of the times when we hear something and we just, without even thinking or taking a breath and pondering it, we just outright refuse it. Oftentimes I feel that's like, oh, that's something you should probably be sinking deeper into then. If you're outright refusing it without even a breath, that means you didn't consider it because it already struck a nerve, because you know that there's a lesson in there. And so, you know, I don't want to just keep going off on that, but I appreciate the way that you're approaching this film, because I can tell that the film was the, how should I say it, the vehicle of the message that wanted to come through one way or another. It's very obvious to see. And to stay on the topic of the film, just so I could be respectful with your time, but the film is probably going to launch around spring of 2023. You said that on your website there, you might be able to screen it even earlier for some people who go to the website and find out how to do that. Please explain for the audience there. And then also, what is this the start of? What do you feel this being the conception of? Oftentimes people will say, well, this film is going to give birth to a book or a whole program, and it seems like you already have some things in the works. But yeah, those are my questions. What is this to give birth to, and when can we expect to be seeing it?
Thanks, Ben. That was a really great question. I'm glad you answered that. So I'll just I'll answer the first one there. So if you go onto our website, there's a very short form that you can get on the watch list. In the next, actually, like 3 weeks or so, we're going to be putting together some brain trusts and some workshops on the first episode, because this is going to be one of either 3 or one of 6 episodes in this series. And we're looking to bring in people that are generally interested in the topic but aren't experts, to get their ideas on and their feedback, like just true uninhibited feedback on this first episode. Because, I mean, obviously we've been in it for so long that it's difficult to really see it with fresh eyes, right? So that would be fun. Maybe anybody listening would be like to be a part of that. But then also, once we get more like post-production wraps up, we are taking this to distribution. This is going to be on Netflix or Disney Plus. I'm manifesting it. It's happening. It's already handled. Don't worry about it. Right. But until that happens, because that could be a multi-year process. Who knows? We're going to do early screenings of it just on our website. So if you put your email address in there, we will let you know when it's available to view. And that's probably later this year. I would say at least, later this year.
Yeah.
And then in terms of what's next, go for it.
Well, because Jess and I are lofty, I do have to say, because I want to say it out loud, we have gotten a great connection in Hollywood. We just sailed under a lucky star there. Well, it was just divine. It wasn't a lucky star. It was just what it is, because it's supposed to happen. The plan is, we kind of have this concept, but we're not stuck to the name, but we're calling it the Art of Adversity. Art of Adversity is traveling post-traumatic growth in a manageable way that everyone can do. Some of it is like no secrets, breath work. Some of it is a lot more entailed. It turns out, though, we're human beings and we're actually really damn good at being human beings. We just kind of forgot. And with this new algorithm, this new formula, we just put it out to our group. This is the lofty part. That we want to win the Nobel Peace Prize. It's not about winning the Nobel Peace Prize. It's about like a cluster algorithm of bringing people together all around the world to literally raise that consciousness, to start adding to the white, if you will, or the black, depending on your perspective. This isn't to make one sound better than the other. So that's where we're hoping it eventually goes to. It's going to be as much kind of designed to draw attention, quote unquote, and be entertaining, but to give people tools so that they can say, okay, I can start here. You know what I mean? I can do this. I got this. I got these little assets around me, just to start to shift those where they're driving their attention towards. And that's the big lofty goal. This might end up on YouTube for free. Who knows?
But we want to truly trigger a mass movement of people embracing the art of adversity, because life is inherently traumatic. And I don't mean to sound so dramatic when I say that, but it's true. Life can be super hard sometimes. That is expected in the human experience. And why is it a part of the human experience? Maybe it's because it's purposeful and it's here to teach us things. It's part of our evolution. And we can see that by ignoring it, that's not working. I mean, just look at the 60s, right? Look at the Stepford Housewives moment where everything was fine and we take pills to pretend like our husbands aren't the worst, stuff like that. Not you, honey.
Hence why we're separate.
But so maybe this is our era-defining moment, not us, meaning Jeff and I, but as a collective, is this our era-defining moment where we're like, oh yeah, tough stuff happens for a reason. Let's figure out why that is. Is there an art form to this? Is there a science to it? And maybe that could really change some stuff.
Yeah, because every epoch in human history has been defined by chance. And we are fucking smart enough. We have enough technology to do it on purpose and set our own epoch, instead of just being which is important to bring awareness. I'm not saying that, but instead of that finger point, I'm going to, what was the one where the call to action was plant a tree?
Oh, breaking boundaries.
Breaking boundaries, people should watch that and be like, holy, I'm terrified. But how many people planted trees? Probably none, because they got too much shit to resolve.
Also, Breaking Boundaries said, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here. Breaking Boundaries is an environmental social movement documentary, which I thought was really good until that call to action. But it was legit the world is going to end in 8 years, or at least mass flooding. Plant a tree, trees legit won't have time to grow by that time.
Anyway, that's here and there. We're going off on a tangent, Ben. Sorry about that.
That's all good, and it's interesting to see the way that you conceptualize the answer, because I also feel like sometimes call to actions are, an interesting thing, for a filmmaker, because if you as a filmmaker, I use the on the nose terminology a lot. If you just come right out and ask people to do something, there's an element of them not having figured it out and it being born inside them as well. And that's why oftentimes in my films, I intentionally wrap it in allegory and intentionally don't come right out and say we should be doing this or should, using the terminology should, or must or have to. And so I think that's really beautiful to see that every question that I've asked you, where it goes back to, what I'm tracking is where it goes back to inside of you is making that the empowerment be obvious in the art form. There's a form of empowerment where it's, if you properly give the space for a plant or a child to grow the way they must, you don't have to direct them as much as modern parents think you do. And that's the same thing with films. Like, you don't have to control and hyper control the script and like, no, I need you to say that again and say it exactly like this. There's this deeper intelligence that wants to come through that process. So I appreciate that. I sense that you're both picking up on that. And I would love to see it. I would love to, before the end of the year, whenever that happens, I would definitely love to see it and just see where this is growing, because I absolutely feel I've always been, not with a call to action, but in my own way, putting out the word for more people to step into their inner artist. And I really, I'm biased, but there's something about film where you touch music, you touch auditory, you touch visual, you touch conceptual, philosophical, intellectual, all these types. And again, as you said, you're able to replicate it and put it out online. It's able to go viral, and something that you gave birth to, your art, your clever way of saying what it is you want to say comes through. And I don't know, maybe next time after the launch, we'll have you back, because I was even thinking of this today, how we talk about genetic evolution, but mimetic evolution as well. The ideas that kind of grow a life of their own. And we artists really have a lot more power than we give ourselves credit for in the industry, I would say. Because when you watch a film, you have somebody's attention for an hour at a time, let's say over a series, over 10 episodes, whatever, or 2 hours all at once. To keep somebody's attention and to be able to speak and, have music and visuals be the container for 2 hours of their undivided attention, hopefully, is magic. It really is. It also can be very cathartic. So thank you for taking that leap. And I guess I want to just end by asking, what, I already asked you what's next after this, but I mean, and you did say the Nobel Peace Prize, but what if there's one? Let me actually ask it this way: if there's somebody hurting out there, like the quintessential person that seems to be hurting out there, and they would categorize themselves as having post-traumatic stress, and they're interested in bending the curve or developing that into or at least stepping deeper into the growth element of it, because as I guess you already said, you don't get rid of the stress part of it, so paradoxically, it's always going to be there. But how does somebody engage deeper with that? Because I've even asked this before, and I've heard several things. Some say, really dive into your community. Let people be there for you. Listen to them. Let them just, be a sounding board and just open up. And others say, you also, you got to go within. You have to have your own time. You have to let it kind of as you were saying, go to the cave and not be interrupted by other people as you're going through the process. I'm sure the answer is both, and listen to your intuition. But I would just like to hear either of you just kind of mention what your thoughts are to that quintessential audience member that might really just need something, beautiful from you to take that step into their healing.
Wow. That's a big question. The first thing that comes to mind is anytime you take any intentional step towards your own growth or your own healing is the right step most of the time. Because even if it's a mistake, even if it's 2 steps backwards, it's energy that you're putting towards yourself, right? And there's something important about that. So I just want to say, no matter who's listening and no matter what you choose to do, whether it's breath work or see a therapist or join a community, that's the right thing. Okay. And then just follow the breadcrumbs from there. But I would say on the topic of post-traumatic growth, a very easy place to start is to simply ask yourself, how did I grow? You know, from that thing that happened, maybe a lot of sucky stuff happened as a result of that. And also, how did I grow? And just a contemplation on that question can send you down some pretty cool rabbit holes. Now, it may not rejig your nervous system. It may not resolve a lot of the relationships that you have destroyed in a wake of your own coping mechanisms, but it can really start getting you thinking through a different frame. And something as subtle as that can make a huge difference.
Yeah. It's a massive difference because there's always a little nug of growth there. So we're not talking genetic deficiencies and we're not talking mass brain injuries because that's a little different. I would say this: stress comes from being insecure in your environment, which can be from your own head, but most likely around you. Do an attention audit. See what in your life has got your attention. The number screen on the microwave, the overhead lights, the arguments with your wife or whatnot. And where is there good attention and where is there bad attention? Because the issue is, you mentioned this, our brains filter out billions of bits of information on what we call implicit bias. They're just loops that are running. They're shortcuts. And they don't allow it to go up to your upper cerebral cortex. And if that's not happening, you're not going to grow. So the more you feel constricting in, there's something in your environment. And it can be internal, yes, but there is actually something in your environment, because as soon as you're in an environment that promotes security, even those traumas will begin to resolve themselves because your body's like, oh, your nervous system is like, oh, I'm in a place I feel secure. I can start to heal. You'll start to dream, because most people who are in some kind of, not even a stress disorder, just most people 9 to 5, stop having REM dreams. And if you don't have REM dreams, you're not sorting anything out. Your brain's not finding the new beautiful connections. It's not building up the abstract world around you. So yeah, check in with your attention. What's got it? Marketing, doesn't matter. Is it healthy or bad, right? Everything's a sensory input. So yeah, what's making you feel secure and insecure?
That's really beautiful. I appreciate that a lot. And I just have to say that, I'm really glad the two of you found the art form of film. I'm excited to see this film. I'm excited to see how it blossoms into future work. And I feel like down the line, we should do this again. I don't have enough filmmakers coming through this podcast. That's really something that I feel is very important to talk about more, as content creation. We're living in a world where it's not going away. And if it does, it's because a calamity probably happened. But aside from that, I just want to say thank you both so much for taking the time. This is really powerful, and I really do encourage everybody to go to the website in all the show notes below. And with that, by the end of this year, please dive in, check out the first episode, be a part of the process of it, because I will say that was one of the most amazing things about Kickstarter and GoFundMe is it was noticed that people, they want to be a part of building something that moves not just them, but others. They want to feel like, even if it was just, I just sent in $10 or I was there and I got to comment on an early screening, just to feel like, yes, I was part of it. I gave my energy to it. That's such a powerful part of the creative process. And I know that, Jeff and Jess, that you would really appreciate that as well. It just, in a sense, helps the touch points. You would know in marketing, it takes 7 to 11 touches before somebody feels like they're secure enough to say, yes, I'll buy it. It's the same thing with anything, even if it's a philosophy. You need to let it sit in and disassociate from it, and then it grows in ways that you maybe didn't even expect. So I would encourage all the audience members, please go to that website and check it out. But just for Jeff and Jess, please stick with it. I'm really excited to see this film and down the line have you back on the program.
Thanks, Ben. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great. And just to echo what you said there, please do join our mailing list. It's posttraumaticgrowth.film, because your bit of input, no matter your background, could really change everything. Like, that's really what we're looking for, is some missing puzzle pieces to this mosaic of stuff that's come our way. And so like that would be really meaningful to us if you guys did do that. Thank you for having us on. It's been fun.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you all. And please, to everybody in the audience, please go to the show notes. Go to the website. If you sat here for the past hour plus, you have enough time to click on that link, to check these sites out, and to just take a moment, use that attention, and just really ponder, what would it be like to engage with a film as it's being built of this kind of a nature, something that approaches the hero's journey, something that really dives into healing, but not from a victim mentality, but what are the diamonds we can mine out of the pressure and the stress and what we've dealt with in our past. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this is the kind of content I love bringing to all of you. Gordon and I, we do as much as we can to make sure that the quality that we bring here is really just touching that deeper resonant node inside all of us that knows when something that can help me is present. And just to be clear, something that can help you is always present as long as you're breathing. But when others speak something and it rings inside you, follow that thread. Don't put it off till later. So seriously, go to the website now, check it out, and seriously consider signing up for the mailing list, doing what you can to help out with this film and help out with this process, help out with fellow filmmakers. Gordon and I are here every single Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And please check out the YouTube page. There is a host of things you can get engaged with, a lot of content there. Go to benjosephstewart.com, sign up, become a member. There's a lot of good content there. And I just want to say I love you for engaging with the path you know that you must engage with. And until next time, I'll catch you all on the Ben Stewart Podcast.